Hi everyone. I get sick and tired of being told how well off I was being a baby boomer against today's times, It gets kind of a bit annoying in the end. So, I've decided to let you know my story of being a baby boomer, okay? Because without being there at the time, you would never know. I can only give you my particular instance in life. Now, I was born in 1952, and by the time that I was 15, I had to go to work. I know most kids don't start work till 18 or 19 these days, but back then you started work at 15. Okay, so that was it. Off I went to work, and I started as an apprentice plumber for Gray's Inn Council in Kent. I don't know if any of you know that area, but back then it was a nice easy little job in a sense that it was fairly local, not too bad. But the wages, let me tell you what they was for a first year apprentice plumber back then, was £3 a week. Yeah, I kid you not, £3 a week. Now at that time, the mod era was still in go, and I'm mad about scooters, always have been. And a friend was selling his scooter, but not for a little while until he could afford a car. We'd done a deal where I gave him £1 out of my money every week until I'd got enough to pay for this scooter. Okay, so that was £1 gone, and obviously you had to pay for your keep back then. You didn't just have the money you earned and it was yours. You had to pay for your keep indoors towards the food and everything that mum had to get and dad had to get and pay out for. So that was another £1 gone. And it'd be about £1 a week to live on. And I know you say things were a lot cheaper back then, but they weren't obviously that cheap. It didn't give a lot of leeway for you to do it out. Okay, so that was my first early years. Things got better obviously as you get through your apprenticeship. You get a bit more and a bit more money. So met Jan, 1970. 4 years later, 1974, we got married. Now, we was living in a shockingly awful flat in Gray's Inn. Pretty despicably awful. I can actually post you a picture of the garden and the back of the house if you like. Here it is. So we lived there, and we were saving like mad between us, because Jan had a part-time job then, and we were saving like mad to try and get out and get our own home. And so it was. We were doing all sorts of work, as I was doing what we called private work then, where you did jobs outside the council. People would say, could you do a little job for me, come back tonight and do me a bath or do a shower or do something or other extra and I'll pay you. They were called private jobs back then, and we'd do them to try and make the money. So I was saving like mad, and eventually kind of got up to the heady heights of £14,000. Yeah, that was some going. Now the house we was after that we found was 17,000. So we sold my car. That got us another 1,000, along with everything else that we had that was worth any money. We got rid of it, so we made up to 15,000. But we still couldn't get a mortgage. The mortgage company wouldn't do it. What the bank was then, I can't remember. An old one around Gray's End at that time, they've long gone, a little small one. But they could only say 15,000, all we could get with both your monies. That's it. We was going to give up when a friend said, have you heard about these finance companies that might lend you the money? It'd be an extra higher rate, but if you're buying a house, they probably will lend you the money. So it was, we found out about this firm called Lombard. I don't know if they're still going, but back then they was there then, and we just wanted to borrow 2,000. Well, we took 2.5 because we had to pay, still have to pay to get it all through the usual stamp duty and things like that, even back then. And well, this interest rate from Lombard was 35%. Yes, our mortgage was almost the same amount we were paying back for this Lombard, 2,500. We're almost parity. So we kind of got the house and found that we were in a right stew. We're trying to get more money because this was killing us. We had the house, it all needed doing up. It was a dump because that was all we could afford. I had no car, so I started to take on what we called call-out work for the Gray's Inn Council. That is, if you had an emergency overnight, you could get called out at 3 in the morning and you'd have to go to the house and fix whatever it is. So it was that because I only had a push bike, I had to ride to our council depot where they would give you a van then to go out and do the jobbing. Well, the worst time for me must have been 1981, I think. There was snow on the ground, thick, heavy snow. It's just after Christmas, it was freezing and everywhere was freezing up. So it was the first night I was on call, and you did it for a whole week. First night I got about 10 call outs. I was out practically all night. Now you can imagine I had to push a push bike through 6 inches of deep snow to get to our council yard, which was a mile or two away. And the time I got there, I was sort of but then they gave me a van that got stuck in the snow anyway, so it wasn't much use trying to get around these jobs, but you had to try and do it because of the money. So don't say something about not having to work hard for your money. You work damn hard. So I was 1 week there, did 2 24 hours straight through, because you had to do your call outs, which could be all night without a break, and then in the morning still go to work for 8 o'clock, or you'd get not paid for that day. You wouldn't get paid. So there was no, like now, that would be frowned upon, something terrible, wouldn't it? But no, you had to do the same work and next day carry on. So it was, I did 40 hours at one time on 2 shifts of the call out. And luckily I'd just come off that weekend, and I literally slept the weekend away nearly, trying to catch up on the sleep. But that's how it was. And so it was that even during the day when you were working doing plumbing, the area of Gray's End was getting bigger and bigger. It was expanding. Districts like Mepham and Culverston and Cobham, you probably may not have heard of those unless you live in that area, were all added on. And that meant I could ride out to a job with the tools strapped on the back on one of those carriers on a push bike, get there, and then what happened? I might want a piece of copper pipe, I might want a fitting that I haven't got in that tool bag. I would have to ride 6 miles back to the depot where we had a store of stuff so we could use. So now to get a length of copper pipe, how would you carry that on a push bike? Well, I had to bungee it on the front of the frame around the seat, and the fittings would have to go in with a tool bag or another carrier that I put on the front so that I could top that up with some fittings in there. And then obviously I couldn't ride it with this long length of pipe, so I'd have to push it. Yeah, so I'd have to push it all the way. It could be 5 miles out of the country somewhere. So that was work, okay, that was work. And it wasn't until a lot later that things started to get better. And once we got into the mid-80s and getting into the late 80s, things started to improve. The money did improve. I eventually got another car, so life was easier. I could drive around. Jan had started training as a school teacher, and by the 90s she'd got her training done, and by 93 I think she was a teacher. So she started bringing in decent money then, better than what jobs she'd had before, although she was a high level shop manager at one time. I don't know if you remember Bambers, a store called Bambers, but anyway they were quite big, and she was a big manageress at one time. But she gave it all in to go and do school teaching, training, and to become a teacher. So our money started to improve. So we'd moved another house before then, so we had our first 2 up, 2 down. We'd had another house we moved to that needed complete refurbing again in 1985, and then we got to 89, 90 and moved again to a bungalow in Gray's Inn. Again, it all wanted to do, every one of these houses wanted work doing, that's why they were cheap. Okay, so it wasn't just moving and this is all right. No, it was hard graft. And so it was. That's how easy it was for us baby boomers. And it wasn't until the late 90s that you really started to feel you got something back for all that hard graft and work that you did. And that's just my personal experience. I don't know what yours is like or anybody else is like, but when I hear one more thing about baby boomers having it so bloody easy,